Yasuke, the story of the first black samurai. This anime it's a hot mess. It's just not good. And I wanted to like this show because I like the premise. Now, I wasn't excited about this show. It wasn't a show I was looking forward to. I saw the trailer on Netflix and it sounded kind of cool. I knew I would watch it eventually, but it wasn't something I was excited for and looking forward to. And I'm glad that wasn't the case because I would have been so disappointed because the show just isn't good. Now, I do want to point out some things about Yasuke that I think are well done, and that is the animation. The animation is all around just pretty good and that's sometimes great. The action scenes are overall well done. I found the action to be well choreographed and the action scenes themselves to also be well animated. You know, sometimes you get a show where the show look very pretty, but the action scenes, you can tell they cheaped out on the action. They didn't do that in Yasuke. The animation all around, from just the background scenery to the colors to the action scenes, all around just well done and at sometimes truly great. But that's about where the compliments for this show end. Everything else is pretty bad. And I want to start out with the voice acting. Now, Lakeith Stanfield, I like him as an actor. I love him in Atlanta and he is truly great in Judas and the Black Messiah. The guy is a talented actor, but not necessarily a great voice actor. I don't know what other voice work he's done, but in Yasuke specifically, he's not good. He is just monotone all the time. He never really changes the way his voice and the way he projects and anything. It's just very boring, his voice acting style in Yasuke. Again, I don't know what other voice work he's done, but in Yasuke, not great. This was not a good voice acting performance. I can tell that he is not someone accustomed to voice acting. People, I think, don't really understand like the difficulties of voice acting and what all goes into it. Lakeith Stanfield did not do a good job in Yasuke. Maybe in other stuff he is a great voice actor, but he wasn't in Yasuke. And I noticed it from the first episode, and I thought, okay, first episode, maybe he'll get better as he goes. And he did it. It was pretty much bad all the way through. And when your main character, the person who is voicing the main character isn't good, it kind of takes you out of the show every once in a while when I was just really hit several times by how bad his performance was as Yasuke, the voice actor for Yasuke. So that is like the first thing that really hit me about the show, is just not being good. And secondly, who is the villain of Yasuke? Is it the warlord, just the whatever mythical or supernatural being, creature that is? I thought it would be the mercenaries, but they eventually become good later on in the show. So who is your villain? And I'm pretty sure we all agree that without a good villain, your show is kind of hampered. And Yasuke doesn't have a good villain because it doesn't really even have a villain, like one villain you can just point to that is present at least early on in the show and is like shown. The warlord or whatever creature or thing or being entity that Yasuke battles later on in the show, like episodes like I want to say 5 and 6. Where was that in episode 1, 2, 3, and 4? It just wasn't there at all. And the mercenaries, they were there, but they eventually had some miraculous change of heart and all of a sudden become good. That's another thing that I thought was kind of stupid, where these mercenaries are shown to not be good people. Right? They are mercenaries who are willing to capture Yasuke, knowing that the priests were going to kill him. They were down with that. And then all of a sudden later in the show, they just have a change of heart and they're willing to give their lives for these people that they don't know. And for Yasuke, a person they were like all like down with killing not too long ago, and they just have a change of heart, and all of a sudden they're sacrificing themselves for a cause that they are not a part of. That part of the storyline didn't really sit well with me. But the thing that really overall I have a problem with, and I think is the biggest problem with Yasuke, is the story itself. It is supposed to be the story of the first black samurai, but the fact that Yasuke is black hardly even comes up in the show. It doesn't really come up at all after the first episode, with the exception of a few jokes here and there later on. But it really seems that the juicy story, the interesting story, is what we get in the flashbacks. And the show would have been a lot better if the little snippets we get in the flashbacks had been the actual show. where we get to see the challenges of being a black samurai coming up in the court of Nobunaga, rising from a servant to a samurai and that kind of stuff. We don't really get to see that. We get to see all this other weird shit that happens afterwards, where you have these mechs and you have all this magic and stuff, which I'm not against having magic and mechs in your show, but if your selling point of the show is the story of the first black samurai, how about you actually tell the story of the first black samurai? This show doesn't tell that story. It was sold to us as the story of the first black samurai, Yasuke. It doesn't tell Yasuke's story. We get little snippets of it in flashbacks, but that's it. It would have been so much better if we would got to see, you know, him coming to Japan, the when Nobunaga decides to buy him from the trader he was traveling with. We get to see a little bit of that, but we don't get to see it in its totality. You know, see him rising through the ranks of Nobunaga's court, where he goes from a servant to a samurai, the challenges of being the black samurai, and there's everything. We just get snippets here and there, and it's almost like teasing us, where we get to see what this story could have been or how great it could have been with these little flashbacks and snippets, but we don't get to see in its totality what would have been the much more interesting story. And that is the biggest problem with Yasuke, is you have the story of the first black samurai and you don't really focus on the fact that he is the first black samurai. You have to bring in all these other things that you didn't really need to have an interesting show. You didn't need to have all this magic and mysticism and then this weirdly advanced technology with the mechs coming in to have an interesting show. You had all the ingredients to an interesting show. You had him have a love interest who herself was facing the challenges of being the first, I don't want to say the first, but a female samurai in a world that, you know, really glorifies tradition. You had Nobunaga being a progressive leader. Nobunaga is gay in this show. You had everything you needed to make an interesting show, and it's like they didn't think that was enough, and they had to bring in all this extra shit that doesn't really add to the story at all. And in the process of doing that, they just really didn't give enough time to the actual meat of the story, or the meat of what could have been a great story. And in my opinion, it was to the detriment of the show. Overall, the show just wasn't good. There are so many problems plaguing the show. The writing isn't very tight. None of the lines really hit home for me. It's just not a well-written show. Again, the voice acting when it comes to Yasuke and Lakeith Stanfield specifically isn't good. The story could have been so much better if it had focused on Yasuke's actual story. You know, the actual story of the first black samurai, Yasuke. It doesn't focus on that. It focuses on some other shit that is so unnecessary. The mercenaries having their sudden change of heart, that was dumb. There's just things about this show, or a lot of things about this show that aren't good, and they're very integral to the show. These aren't like minor things that I'm saying that aren't good. If it was just Lakeith Stanfield's voice acting not being good, I could overlook that if everything else was good. But that's not the case. That there are major parts of the show that just aren't good. The main character's voice acting, not good. The whole not really having a villain, that is a major thing. The mercenaries, who are a large part of the show, having a sudden and inexplicable change of heart, that is, you know, a major part of the show. There are all these things that were just very big problems and doesn't make any sense, and all around add up to Yasuke not being a good anime. It just isn't. I wish it was. I would love to come on here and talk about how great this show was and give it, you know, rave reviews, but I can't. And if you disagree with me, let me know in the comments. Maybe you thought Yasuke was just all around great, but I just don't see how, you know. And you know, this is all chopped up to opinion. I'm not saying my word as gospel, but I really don't know how people watched this and thought it was great or thought it was good, unless you just came in for simply just some good action. And you got that. Again, the action was pretty good, and that's sometimes very good, and animation is overall really good as well. So if you just want to see a pretty show that has some decent action scenes, then sure, you probably enjoyed this. But if you came into it wanting to see the story of Yasuke, the first black samurai, you, like me, were probably disappointed. That's all I have for you on this one, guys. If you enjoyed this video, go hit that thumbs up. And if you are so inclined, subscribe and share. It would help me out a lot. If you didn't like the video, or if you disagree with anything I said, let me know why down in the comments. We can talk about it. I respond to almost everything. Also, feel free to follow and hit me up on Twitter at That Dude Anime, and I'll see you guys in the next one.